Millions of Californians are suffering through delays and frustration in getting unemployment insurance. The state's Unemployment Development Department and its antiquated system is just one of the problems. The biggest issue seems to be rampant fraud that has brought the system to a halt twice now and cost taxpayers as much as $10 billion. Well, this week, the NBC4 I-Team consumer investigator, our own Randy Mack, has been taking a closer look at what brought us to this point. His special report, The Perfect Storm, Unemployment Insurance Fraud, continues right now with one of the ways people are scamming the system at your expense. Randy?
Chuck, tonight we're going to take a look at eligibility fraud, and eligibility fraud is just what it sounds like. Either you were employed during this pandemic and lost your job and now are eligible for benefits, or you aren't. Now, clearly, California prison inmates are not beneficiaries in this situation, but that has not stopped them and some others from applying for and receiving some of that money.
You may remember what it was like at the start of the pandemic trying to file a claim online.
It's incredibly frustrating, and I think that it is the perfect example of the bureaucracy and the red tape.
And when you try to call EDD,
thank you for calling the Employment Development Department Unemployment Insurance Office. We are currently receiving more calls than we have the capacity to answer.
Just more frustration.
It's a complete nightmare. It's bureaucracy at its worst.
According to ID.me, the company hired by EDD to stop fraud by verifying the identities of claimants, about 30% of unemployment claims filed in California are fraudulent. I spent time talking with Blake Hall, the CEO of ID.me.
The prisoner fraud is on top of the 30% that we've quantified.
That's right. People incarcerated, gaming the system from behind bars for millions. Hall calls it a form of eligibility fraud.
And that also increases wait times for legitimate folks.
After months of clogging the application process and bilking unemployment insurance, the state caught on to inmates filing claims. Hall says that hasn't stopped them from trying. Some even attempt to go through ID verification screening.
Even in the technical logging, it says like inmates, media device, iPad 4. We're not going to let that go through. We see a spouse who will initiate video chat and then has her incarcerated husband, who's on like FaceTime through the phone.
Investigators say infamous killers, including Scott Peterson, convicted of murdering his wife, Lacey, and Yosemite killer, Carrie Stainer, are among the inmates whose names are implicated in scamming EDD benefits. But it's not just prisoners committing eligibility fraud. Hall says there are now investigations at assisted living centers where caregivers use physically and mentally challenged patients in video chats with ID.me, trying to claim benefits. And then there are those that go the Halloween route.
These are masks that we see in California where they try to pass the selfie check. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Hall showed us a screenshot of a mask a fraudster used trying to impersonate the photo of an elderly man. And while this one looks like a rubber mask, Hall says just like the technology used to combat billions in fraud, disguises are getting more sophisticated.
We are increasingly seeing computer-generated 3D printouts. So like 3D printers, they take an image of the victim and then print out a mask that looks like the victim's face.
Even with the technology involving 3D generated masks, Hall says that eligibility fraud is still just a drop in the bucket. It's about 3% of what his company, ID.me, is actually catching in terms of fraud. The vast majority of the fraud, he says, is straight up identity theft in various forms, both domestic and globally driven. And we'll focus more on that tomorrow when the perfect storm of unemployment insurance fraud continues. Reporting live in Chino Hills, I'm Randy Mack for NBC4 News.